Many years ago in the land of the Maya, there was a little village called Napot. There lived an old witch who knew all the secrets of plants, which would heal and which would harm as she chose. Her only friends were some very odd hunchback men that only she could see. They were invisible wizards who had taught her everything she knew about plants, as well as spells both good and evil.
This old woman is the beginning of a legend about a mysterious character who later became famous throughout the land of the Maya.
Would you like to hear the story?
The Dwarf of Uxmal is perhaps one of the most fascinating stories of the indigenous oral traditions of the ancient Maya.
So I'm now standing in front of the Magicians Pyramid, also known as the Soothsayers Pyramid. Mayan tradition has it that this particular structure was built overnight, one night, by a dwarf with supernatural powers.
Mysterious character.
Our journey begins by exploring one of the most mysterious archaeological sites of the Mayan world, the legendary invisible city of Uxmal.
Welcome.
Known for its aesthetics, unique architecture, and stunning symbolism, to the uninitiated eye, it is by far the most dramatic of all the hill and flatland archaeological sites on the Yucatan Peninsula. But when viewed through the eyes of a symbolist, it becomes clear that this sacred site represents the divine feminine principle. Upon further examination, it becomes apparent that astronomical calculations were carefully considered when the layout of this site was designed.
Behind me is the Magicians Pyramid, also known as the Soothsayers Pyramid, built in 5 stages. So you had the original pyramid, and then there were 4 additional stages built on top of that.
But unlike many other Mayan sites, no stone quarry has ever been found at Uxmal. Where the Maya quarried the stone from is a mystery, and how they conveyed it to the site is unknown to archaeologists. But the indigenous oral tradition maintains that Uxmal's most famous structure was built over one night with the use of magic by a dwarf who was hatched out of an egg with magical assistance from his sorceress mother as part of a challenge issued by the king. That structure today is known as the Magicians Pyramid, Temple of the Magician, House of the Magician, House of the Dwarf's Pyramid, Pyramid of the Soothsayer, and Casa el Adivino. All names that have been given by the local Maya consecrated to this indigenous oral tradition. The first detailed account of the rediscovery of these ruins were published by Jean-Frédéric Waldeck in 1838, who went on to label it the Kingsborough Pyramid in honor of his financial backer. Needless to say, that name didn't stick. However, Waldeck's account of Uxmal inspired explorers John Lloyd Stephens and his illustrator friend Frederick Catherwood to make 2 extended visits to the site through 1839 and 1841. From his notes, explorer John L. Stephens published his now famous Incidents of Travel in the Yucatan in 1843. It is from this publication that we have our first written account of the oral tradition. Stephens writes about his arrival at Uxmal and tells us how he was seated in the doorway of the Magician's Pyramid when he received from the lips of a local Mayan the legend behind the site's tallest structure and its builders. He was told the story about the old woman. Varied accounts of this legend have been perpetuated throughout the homes of the Maya for centuries. For example, the elders of the village of Napot tell of an old lady, a sorceress and an herbalist, who knew the mysteries of the skies and cures to every illness. The legend tells us this old woman was wise and powerful, but she lived in a common hut on the very spot now occupied by the Magician's Pyramid, opposite of the governor's house. The old woman mourned over not having any children. Indigenous accounts tell us she had a relationship with supernatural, invisible, hunchback beings that only she could see. They guided her with teachings and knowledge about the stars and sky, plants, healing remedies, and spells. She consulted these invisible beings for divine guidance and asked them for a child. In her distress, she one day found an oversized iguana egg in the jungle, covered it with a cloth, and laid it away carefully in the corner of her hut. Every day she looked at it until one morning when she found the egg hatched and a baby was born from it. Delighted, she called him her son, caring for him, so that in only 1 year the child began to walk and talk with the intelligence of a man, yet he had stopped growing in size. Despite being a dwarf, she told him that one day he would be a great lord or king. In the version told to Stevens, she told him to go to the house of the governor and challenge him to a trial of strength. However, other accounts told by the Maya indicate that this dwarf had supreme intelligence and had observed the fire in which the long-lived woman had spent most of her time in front of, and one day, while she was out fetching water, he began to dig beneath the fire pit. And it was there he discovered this drum-like musical instrument, known to the Maya as a tunkul, in the ground below. Once he beat the drum, it vibrated throughout the land. Immediately, the old woman returned. She was very angry, and she explained to the dwarf that what he had done would change the destiny for everyone. Now terrible events would occur, and he would be caught in the middle of them. Even as the sorceress was telling the dwarf about the consequences of his actions, the sound of the drum was reaching the king's grand stone palace. You see, the king was gripped with great fear at the pounding of this drum, as a prophecy in the land stated that the sound would precede the end of his rule. In the version transmitted to Stevens, the dwarf's first challenge was to lift a 75-pound stone, at which he cried all the way home to the old woman. Upon return, his mother sent him back and said that if the governor lifted the stone first, the dwarf would be able to after. The governor lifted the first stone, and the dwarf immediately did the same. This was followed by a series of challenges, all of which were met by the dwarf. Upset at being matched by the little fellow, the governor had told the dwarf that unless he made a house in just one night that was taller than any other in the village, he would kill him. The dwarf returned once again to his mother, who had assured him not to be disheartened. The next morning, he awoke and found himself in a lofty building. The governor, seeing it from the doors of his palace, was astonished and sent out for the dwarf. He told him to collect 2 bundles of wood, with one of which he would beat the dwarf over the head, and after the dwarf would beat him with the other. Once again the dwarf ran home to his mother, who told him he need not to be afraid, and crowned him with a tortilla on his head. The trial was made in the presence of all great men in the city. The governor broke his bundle of wood over the head of the dwarf without hurting him in the least. He then tried to avoid the trial on his own head, given his word in the presence of his officers, and was obligated to submit. The second blow of the dwarf broke the governor's skull into pieces, and all the spectators hailed over the victor as the new governor or king. The legend tells us that the old woman died shortly after, but not without passing on a powerful message that the dwarf had disobeyed, where he fashioned himself like a god in front of the people and served to prove a lesson in ego that ruined the city of Uxmal. Tales of dwarf-like beings with special powers and excellent craftsmanship are not limited to the Maya culture. Take for example the Hawaiian legend of the Menehune, a dwarf-like race that are also believed to possess special powers. In fact, in 1829, a census from the island of Kauai listed 65 people as Menehune. But the question is, did the Menehune actually exist? Some researchers will argue Menehune is derived from Manahune, a title that was given to the island's early inhabitants by the Tahitians, meaning commoner in the Tahitian language, referring to a race of people small in social status rather than physical stature. Yet, the Hawaiian legend has it that the dwarf race of Menehune worked to build their temples overnight in a single night, and the state of Hawaii honors and acknowledges this tradition at several sacred sites. During an on-site investigation in Hawaii, a local brought me to a mysterious hole in the ground that leads to a tunnel that requires one to first crawl through on their stomach before it opens into a small chamber. The construction of the chamber suggests a less than average sized human may have built it. I'll detail this location in a future video. The self-taught engineer and amateur sculptor Edward Leeds Scallon, who single-handedly built the limestone structure known as Coral Castle in Homestead, Florida, using what he claimed was the secret of the builders of the pyramids of Egypt, also worked only during the night to complete his unusual accomplishment. Why is it that nightfall is a common recurring theme that supports the construction of these legendary builders? The story of the Dwarf of Uxmal is fascinating, but the pyramid itself is no less. It is the tallest structure at Uxmal, with an accepted height of 115 feet. It is the most distinctive Mayan structure on the Yucatan Peninsula, and its rounded sides, considerable height, steep slope, and unusual elliptical base make it one of the most unique pyramidal structures in the world. The pyramid is thought to be an image of the world by Octavio Paz, and its astrological alignment suggests the ancients' interest in the stars. Keep in mind the semi-mythical builder's mother was schooled in the power of the stars. The legendary association of the pyramid with a magician may be understood as an indication that the structure, and indeed the entire sacred part of the Uxmal complex, had an ancient and ongoing use as a mystery school and ceremonial center. Let me know what you think about this legend and the mysterious pyramid in the comments below. And if you're up for experiencing the energy of Uxmal in person and want to learn more about the mysteries of the Maya, I invite you to join us for the Adept Initiate's first ever community adventure and study trip. You can visit adeptexpeditions.com for more details. The trip is limited to the first 18 people, but we still have some spaces left, so I'll leave a link in the description below where you can register today to join us for the Mysteries of the Maya study trip. Adept Initiates.
Las escuelas de misterio de los Maya. Are you ready?
The time has finally come.
Are you ready?
Join our first Adept expedition into the primitive jungles of our advanced ancestors as we journey together through time. Our first ever community adventure into the ancient mystical world of the Maya. Trek with a group of the world's most passionate seekers of truth as we study the sacred symbology and hidden esoteric teachings of Mexico's wisdom keepers. The world has been waiting to decipher the long-forgotten secrets of our indigenous roots. Come along with us as we trek through, take part in a traditional Mayan shaman sunrise ceremony, and explore the ancient pyramids of the Yucatan. Whether you're an esoteric enthusiast or armchair archaeologist, grab your Indiana Jones hat because you're invited to join a rebel group of researchers led by the Adept Initiates and special guest co-host, best-selling author and symbolist Richard Casaro, on a mission to piece together the fragments of this mysterious ancient puzzle. We'll travel off the beaten path to explore hidden ruins no other guide will take you to. Learn from a Mayan wisdom keeper and ask questions about indigenous teachings. Examine the symbols hidden into the architecture. Discover the ancient sacred temples and Mayan pyramid structures towering in the jungle, and descend with us into the underworld tunnels of an ancient Mayan cave system. We'll join a long line of royalty and legendary explorers by making our temporary home at the historic Uxmal Hacienda, located directly across from the Uxmal pyramids and temples. Very few spots remain for our very first Adept expedition. Let's document the experience together and share our research with Adept Initiates around the world. Discover the mysteries of the Maya with Adept Initiates and very special co-host Richard Casaro. May those who are called to journey with us find their way.